to have her here. So we want to welcome Dr. Joey. She got a PhD here from UCLA and in psychology. And as you know, that department is rated #1 in the nation, as I know, right? And so we want to welcome Dr. Joey, who's going to talk about anxiety and mindfulness. Let's welcome her.
Hi, everyone. Well, thank you for the introduction. My name is Joey. I feel like coming back home, but in a different building, in a different house, but coming home. As Pastor Soon mentioned, I got my training at UCLA in clinical psychology, graduated in 2012, and have been at Fuller since then. So this is my 12th year at Fuller. When Pastor Soon asked me to give a talk on something, I said, well, I can talk about anxiety. I'm trained as a clinical psychologist, and in my private practice, I see people with anxiety. So my training has been with like kids with anxiety. I work with like adults with anxiety, and more recently, I work with a lot of new parents with postpartum anxiety. And so when I talked to Pastor Soon, I was like, I can talk about anxiety. But when I started thinking about what exactly to talk about, I didn't want to talk about specifically kind of anxiety in terms of like social anxiety or like a phobia. I think of anxiety as synonym as stress. I think something that we may perhaps relate to, especially in a time like this. And so I realized that the title is not really enticing, stress, anxiety, and mindfulness, and probably not very helpful. I would have renamed it as how to cope with stress and anxiety during this time of uncertainty. So with that, we can start our time together. And let me just pray for us and for myself. God, we just pray that in the next, 50, 60 minutes of our time together, that your Spirit is present with us. Help us in our food coma, in our tiredness. Help us to hear your voice. And to be attuned to your voice and to your presence in our day-to-day. Amen. So I'm going to start with an interactive thing. Akio told me that it's not going to go well, but I'm going to try. So if we could do the next slide. Thank you. Oh, no, there's no... Okay. So you guys are spared. Are there animations with this? Oh, I was going to have you guys guess. So, okay, no interaction. So it's okay. We can go to the next slide. So American Psychological Association in 2020 did a survey of thousands of Americans and asked about their top stressors. I was going to have you guys guess what their top stressors are. But this is kind of like the list where predominantly people are stressed about inflation and finances. Like money is kind of like top of people's like concerns. There's gun violence, healthcare, global attention, and then in 2022, like COVID was on people's mind. And so those are kind of like the top 5 types of stressors that a typical American in 2022 face. Next. When we think about stress, in psychology, we think of like having 3 different components. There is an event or a circumstance that is stressful, potentially, a trigger that elicits a subjective experience of emotions. So emotionally, affectively, we feel certain things. And it affects our body. So there's a physiological reaction to stress. When we think about triggers or events, oftentimes we think of like, oh, there's like unpleasant or negative things that are stressful. But in fact, like positive things can be stressful too. Like maybe a job promotion, maybe you're getting married, maybe you have gonna grow your family. These are all positive things, but they can be stressful too. Also, stressors may not immediately affect us. Things may happen that may not impact us per se in terms of like our day-to-day or what's gonna happen to us, but it's also stressful. And finally, stressors are not necessarily just events. Us thinking about a stressful event can elicit a negative emotional response, like we are stressed just by thinking about a particular event. We think about that, oftentimes when we think about stressors, we think about this kind of immediate domain. Within our immediate individual domain, we are stressed about perhaps our work, our school. We're stressed perhaps about money or finances, relationship, health, parenting. These are things that we are stressed or worried about on a day-to-day basis. But that's not the only thing that impacts us, right? As we kind of increase the concentric circle, there's this idea of vicarious stress. So these may be like a good friend of mine may be experiencing a difficult period. A loved one may be going through some health crisis. It doesn't impact us per se, but by us being related to them, we take on the stress of our friends. We take on the stress of our family members. And obviously, the closer we are to those people, the more it impacts us. And as we get further around the concentric circle, I don't know about you guys. Now when I scroll over the news, I take a deep breath every time when I open an app, because I'm like stressed reading just the headlines. Many headlines, I can't click into it, just because by reading the headlines, I'm like, my body is like reacting to it. Like we do live in a time of uncertainty, both local news, like whether it's mass shooting, whether it's like hurricanes, whether it's like news of things happening in this country or in this city, or globally. Like, right, we hear about the wars, we hear about the economic crisis, the migration crisis. All of this, again, may not impact us per se, like it doesn't impact us taking this job or us doing this class, but our body is impacted. Our body remembers, and it impacts us as well. When we think about stress or anxiety, again, I use those kind of like interchangeably because I'm not talking, again, about a specific anxiety disorder. We're talking about this anxiety or this sense of worrisome that we all experience, which is also known as stress. There's kind of two types. There's an acute, which is kind of like short-term, one-time event. So for me, like having to prepare for this presentation, my kids were sick, I was sick, I lost my voice, I wasn't sure if I could make it or not. It's stressful. But then it ends after today, right? It's a one-time thing after which it won't impact me per se. It could be like a work deadline, it could be a job interview, it could be kind of like a fight that you had with a significant other. It could be pleasant things like planning for a wedding. It's a one-time acute stress that we all have, and perhaps you guys can think of several acute stressors that's upcoming this week. But there's also chronic stress. These are kind of long-term, repeated stress. So for example, managing money finances. Maybe there's not an acute stress in terms of how I'm going to pay rent next month, but there's this like long-standing worry about money issues, like can we make ends meet? Can we provide for my family? Will things be okay? Or parenting, right? That may not be a specific thing. Maybe like when our kids is sick, it may be an acute stressor. But for the most part, parenthood is this chronic, never-ending. It's not going to end when the kid turns 18. I can ask Pastor soon, probably. Or my mom still stresses about me at the age of whatever. Or when a fight becomes repeated, right? The frequency is higher, is greater, then it's no longer an acute. It then kind of like spills over into this chronic relationship stress. So those are kind of different types of stressors. As we mentioned, stressors have this event, circumstance that happens. It elicits typically an emotional response. And usually this emotional response is one of stress or anxiety or tension. Those are typically kind of like a negative, right, unpleasant form of emotional response. And as humans, they're typically a continuum of how we respond to negative emotions. On the one end, we may kind of like suppress our emotions. There's this notion kind of called striving. So no matter how stressed we are, we kind of like put up this like strong, happy face and say that things are okay. Or like my dean, who always shares this at student orientation every year, he says like grad school, and I'd imagine it's true in many contexts too. In grad school, it's kind of like this duck, where on the top, you look effortless, and you look like you're just swimming like the way you're supposed to, like not stressed. But if you look under the water, the duck is like pedaling like crazy. So it's kind of the idea that we show kind of the strong side, and we try to like suppress and hide our stress or our negative emotions. Like we may tell ourselves we don't have time to worry. We may tell ourselves like we just need to focus on what needs to be done. There's this deadline. I don't have energy. I don't have time to think about these stress. It may not be conscious. A lot of it is unconscious, right? Like we just kind of sweep certain emotions underneath the rug, or we stuff it in the closet, so to speak. So on the one end, we may suppress our emotions. And on the other hand, when we have a stressor, we may think our problems out of the way, if that makes sense. And the psychological term for it is rumination. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes when I am stressed, I just wanted to figure it out in my head. Like I just keep thinking about this over and over and over. I just wanted to like figure out what is going on and try to solve it. And so we kind of like keep thinking. We think about the pros and the cons. We think about what's going on. We think about A and then to B and then to C and then D. And then we're like, where did I end up at D? And then you trace yourself back to C and B and A. And our thoughts are very active, like bunnies that hop. So that's kind of like the two continuums of how we typically respond to negative emotions or to stress. Is either we suppress or we ruminate. But either of these responses are healthy. When we suppress, stress eventually comes back. I think we're sometimes used to this fake it till you make it mentality. You know, like I'm not kind of like holding it together, but it's okay. I can just keep going. I'm used to working hard. I'm used to like doing this. I'm just going to get through this and I can do this. I don't know if people have this experience where maybe you're going through a lot and you're managing. You feel like, okay, I'm managing one at a time. I'm coping. I'm doing well. Things seems to be doing okay. And then on one random day, something small happened. Maybe it was a very minor fight with someone. Maybe it's a random text. Maybe someone just gently pat you on the shoulder. Maybe someone just gently asked, how are you doing? And then out of nowhere, you started crying. And just like tears just rush down. This floodgate is open and these emotions comes gushing out. And you're like, I'm not sure what happened. Like this sense of emotion or response is not like proportionate to exactly what I'm dealing with. And that's because what we see is just on top, right? Underneath the water level is all this hidden stress that you may have stuffed. And we're good at stuffing our emotions because they get in the way sometimes. And we're used to doing that. So suppression works in the short term, right? It helps us focus on our to-do list. It helps us focus on what needs to be done. But it comes at a cost. And a cost comes back compound interest, oftentimes. Well, on the other end, not suppression. Suppression is like we're pretending that they're not happening. We just stuff it underneath the rug. On the other end, it's like we think about these problems. We are like human thinkers. Like, I don't know if people are aware how chatter our minds are. Like when something happens, we just keep thinking and one thought leads to another, leads to another and another. And thoughts are kind of like Post-it notes. Like the more you think, the more they multiply and the more they stick to you. And sometimes the more you try not to think about a problem, the more they stuck to you. So it's kind of like you're tired, it's been a long day, and your mind is very active, and you tell yourself to go to bed. It's like sleep, I need sleep. tomorrow is a big day. I have this important meeting. I need rest. And guess what? The more you tell yourself to go to bed, the harder it is to go to bed. And as we learned before, thinking about a stress, not just about the stress itself, thinking about the stress itself turns on a stress response. Your body responds to thinking about a stress. So I have students who would tell me that I've been thinking about my dissertation, and I'd be like, did you get anything? Did you write anything? He was like, no, I haven't written anything. I'm just like really stressed about it. And I'm like, okay, can you just write something so that we can talk about it? And they were like, okay. And then next week, nothing. I'm like, I'm just been very stressed. I relate to that. I do that. Like I stress about the thing, but I don't really do anything about it. And I'm just stressed about thinking about it. So again, we may do both, right? It is not kind of a mutually exclusive. We do suppression and we do rumination at the same time, or a combination of it depending on the situation. And both comes at a cost. So what we wanted to do is to cultivate this happy medium, which is kind of mindfulness. We don't want to ignore things, thinking that they don't exist. We don't want to get overly attached to things. Mindfulness is kind of like this happy medium where you acknowledge, but you keep a distance. So you'll hear me say this a lot today, like we wanted space. We want a healthy distance. Distance from emotions, distance from our thoughts, distance. And distance, healthy distance is good. It's kind of like it's a detour. It's kind of like family therapy. In family therapy, we talk a lot about individuals, that you can be very close with your family members, but you also want healthy distance. Same with marriage. Marriage can survive when there is a healthy dose of distance and healthy dose of space that you offer to each other. It doesn't mean that you don't care. It just means that you give each other, and in this case, you give yourself some breathing space. Anyone know about mindfulness? Heard about mindfulness in their work? Like when you think about mindfulness, what comes to mind? Meditation? What else? Slowing down? Yeah. If you have to come up with a synonym, like one word that replaces mindfulness, what would it be? Can anyone think of one word? Self-reflection? Presence. I like that. So mindfulness and let's do the next one. Yeah. So I'm going to talk briefly about the modern history of mindfulness because I'm going to talk about a faith-based mindfulness too. Some of you may or may not know. It is made popular by John Kabat-Zinn, and he's a physician in Massachusetts working specifically with patients with chronic pain. So he kind of comes up with mindfulness based on his observation that for patients who have chronic pain, again, pain, anxiety, stress, to me, are kind of synonyms. And we're talking about pain that doesn't go away, which is kind of like stress. Stress kind of won't go away. It's not kind of like you can defeat this and then move on. It just keeps coming back. And the more we try to get rid of pain, paradoxically, it causes one to fixate even more on it. I don't know if anyone has got bitten by mosquitoes. Like you have a mosquito bite and it's very itchy. And sometimes the more you scratch, the itchier it gets. And it's kind of the idea that the more you focus on something, the greater the impact it is. So mindfulness, in its definition, is that you're paying attention in a specific way, in the present moment, and in a non-judgmental way. So how does that relate to what we're studying? So a synonym of mindfulness, some of you guys mentioned like different concepts related to mindfulness. But a synonym from the psychological perspective is awareness and alertness. So oftentimes, because of efficiency, we have to go on autopilot. So I don't know about you guys, but when I wake up, I'm on autopilot. I wake up and then I brush my teeth, I get my kids out, I kind of pack my school bag, I do all this, get in the car and drive. It's all autopilot. It's kind of like mindless. But we have to because it's efficient. We only have like 20 minutes to get out the door and we need to be very efficient. Mindless can also mean that sometimes when we are kind of imagine you're kind of walking with a backpack, you know, and something kind of like you get a text from a friend that's stressful, but you're like, you need to kind of finish this journey. And so you put the rock inside the backpack and you keep going. And then you read this news and then you're like, okay, I don't have time to like think about this, and you put it in the backpack. And then you keep going, and then like something happened, and you're like, I don't have time to like process or to resolve this issue. Let me like dump it in the backpack. So it's kind of like you keep going, and things happen, and you start accumulating stuff until at one point you realize like, oh, my backpack is really heavy. Like what happened? Like I'm no longer traveling light. Like maybe I need to put some things down. But we're so kind of like autopilot that we just keep going. And that's kind of like mindlessness. The other aspect of, we talked before about how humans are really good at thinking. Like we like to think about our problems. And the problem with thinking is that our thoughts pull us to the past and to the present, to the past and to the future, instead of the present moment. So we may think about like, oh, that presentation that I did last week, and I start analyzing, you know, what did I do? How did it go? What could I have done differently? Or we may think about even like further past. We think about like, should I have selected this major? Should I have moved across the country? Should I have stayed here? Should I have come to this? Should I have gone to grad school? Should I have, I don't know. Like a lot of like what ifs, should haves. It's like we think about the past. Or we think about the future, right? We think about all these upcoming tasks, upcoming deadlines, upcoming things that may happen. Our mind is always thinking about perhaps our to-do list. Or when a stressful event happens, like we got a call from one of our son's teacher about a behavior that happened at school. Oftentimes, like our mind may go, like, what does that mean? Like is the kid gonna grow up like whatever? Like, is this gonna happen? Is this a behavior that means that something about his character? Did we do something wrong? Should we not have whatever? Like a lot of anxiety, right? Kind of stemming from one phone call about a relatively minor incident can activate our mind to all these like what ifs that takes us to the future of our kids, future of our, I don't know, parenting domains. But mindfulness is saying like we're paying attention actually in the present moment. The opposite of past is not future. The opposite of past and the opposite of future are both the present moment. How do we live in this present moment right now? And then finally, we often judge our experiences. We like to put labels about certain things are good and certain things are bad. Like stressors are bad. If we feel anxious, it's bad. Like that experience is bad. And so we tend to judge ourselves. And what happens is that we then have like these like bunnies types of emotions or thoughts where we may respond a certain way, and then we judge ourselves for feeling that way. I don't know if you guys have felt that, like, I feel bad for feeling bad, and then I feel bad for feeling bad, that I wasted time feeling bad. And then I feel bad about how I've disappointed, and then I feel bad about, and then it keeps going and going and going. And mindfulness is saying like, again, let's take a step back and just recognize that all emotions are good. I always tell my students, like, a healthy dose of anxiety is good. Like, if you're not stressed about your upcoming dissertation defense, I'm stressed for you. Like, you should be a little stressed. Like, stress in some way is good. It's kind of like emotions, like the whole gamut of emotions are good. Like, I think we live in a society where, you know, we want to be all happy and content, which is good. But then depression, anxiety, tension, those are part of the color scheme that needs to be embraced, that needs to be accepted, and perhaps even celebrated. Emotions help us connect to our thinking parts of our brain. Like, we are human beings where our brain and our heart and our body are all connected. We are not just human thinkers. So emotions are good, or itself are neutral. But it is when they're too reactive, like it tends to overwhelm us, right? When we start thinking about this upcoming project deadline, when we keep thinking about like this upcoming whatever decision that we have to make, and we keep ruminating, that's when we have issues. So the first step when we think about kind of managing stress or anxiety is we need to identify our emotions. Part of mindfulness is that we go through the day with so much going on that each news that we read, each text, each conflict, each work deadline, then becomes like these yarn. I don't know if anyone has like tried to separate a ball of yarn, like all these threads that are kind of tangled, and you have to like pull it one by one. Sometimes emotions are like this. I just feel yucky. I've worked with clients where they're like, I don't know, I just feel bad. I feel yucky. And we have to take a lot of time to help figure out, okay, yucky is emotion, I guess, but what exactly is it? It's probably a lot of nuances, right? Like you may be feeling disappointed about a circumstance. You're also perhaps feeling betrayed by a loved one for not standing up for you in this situation. You feel a little upset at yourself for not advocating for yourself. You feel sad about the situation. Like there's a lot of shades of yuckiness. And in therapy, our first step always is to identify our emotions. Like we don't go just from the stressor to like, okay, how do we problem solve? We need to kind of like take a step and examine what exactly emotions are. And part of emotions, when we get so reactive in the form of whether it's suppression or rumination, is we find emotion scary. And it can be scary because sometimes something will happen and in that moment we feel this intense, overwhelming sense of like fear or intensity. Sometimes emotions just like, it just comes and then we're scared. We're scared of like, maybe the health of our loved one. We're scared of our future. We're scared for our marriage. We're scared for our kids. Our mind goes to the worst case scenario, and we are scared. What does it mean to see emotions as like waves? We were in Malibu a couple weeks ago, and I was just like standing on the beach. When the waves crash, it can feel fierce. It can be a bit scary. Our older one likes to go, and then when it comes, and then he just runs away and kind of screams, and then goes in and out again. Well, it's fun to do it for like 2 minutes, but can you imagine doing it for like 2 hours or 2 days? You'll be exhausted. Like oftentimes when emotions come, we're kind of like Elliot. We're like, oh my gosh, it's scary. Let me run. Like, and then we go back, and then we run. But in fact, emotions are like waves. No matter how strong they come, they will go back. They will like kind of like leave. So what does it mean is that for us is to take a step back and to recognize that emotions come and go. Like they're not scary. It can feel very powerful in that moment. It can feel very intense in that moment. But it shall pass. And taking a step back allows us to not be reactive. So in that moment, we don't just run away, or we don't try to like fight it. We just recognize that, okay, today the waves is pretty strong. I wonder what's going on. I'm noticing that these waves keep coming back. What can I do? Can I take a step further back? Should I maybe not go to Malibu on this day? Should I go somewhere else? It then creates space for us to make better decisions. And then finally, because we live so much in our head, we are not as familiar with our body. We talked about how there's always the trigger, and then the emotional response, and then there's a physiological response. Our body remembers a lot of things. So things that you thought you have processed, things that you thought you have forgotten, things that you thought have passed, like maybe even as early as childhood things, your body remembers. Your body like keeps the score, whether you like it or not. And it may take in the form of fatigue. It may take the form of like this physiological reaction. That's why sometimes things happen, and then we have this strong reaction, and we're not sure why. we're like, oh, I wonder why I'm like reacting so strong. And that's because your body remembers something that your mind may not have remembered, and then it's reacting that way. So, and also recognizing the importance of our body is important with mindfulness, because our thoughts and our emotions can go wherever they are, but our body is always in the here and the now. No matter how much we get pulled to the present, or not, to the past or to the future, our body is always here. Like, we are embodied soul. Like, God creates us as a physical body so then we can live in this present moment. I want to just share one of my favorite stories. And it's a pretty well-known story that most of you may have heard. It's from Elijah, from 1 King, chapter 19. It is like such a human manifestation of Elijah, where Queen Jezebel was trying to murder Elijah. And what happened in chapter 18 before that was that a lot of prophets under Queen Jezebel was worshiping the false god of Baal. And so Elijah was like, okay, let's have a showdown. You call your god of Baal, I call my God up on this Mount Carmel, and then we'll see which god shows up in the form of fire. And Elijah won and killed all the prophets. So it's like a ministry high, right? And then right after that ministry high, when he heard that Queen Jezebel is upset, Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. He came to Beersheba, and he came to a broom bush. He sat down under and prayed that he might die. I have had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors. That's such a strong emotional reaction. It's kind of like little kids, when they say about the emotions, it's typically in extreme forms. I don't know if you've heard little kids talk about emotions. This is the worst thing ever, 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 ever. I will not do this forever and ever and ever. It's like extremes, kind of extents. And that's true when we are burned out, when we are fatigued, when we have experienced this chronic stress and anxiety. And usually when you hear someone around you say words that are very black or white, say words that are kind of very extreme, oh, this is the end of everything, very quote-unquote melodramatic, it's usually a desperate cry for help. It's usually saying, my body I just can't take it. There's so much my body can take. One thing to highlight here, basically Elijah's burned out, right? Elijah is burned out, and when we're burned out, we are depressed, we are stressed, we're tired. And it's not uncommon to feel burned out after, quote-unquote, a high. So kind of when you're working really hard on a specific project, or you are working very hard towards a goal, your body's on adrenaline. You're fight or flight. All your resources are spent towards getting that goal. That's this period where there's a lot of suppression going on. Your mind is laser focused on what needs to be done, and a lot of things just fall on the side. And then when that's done, and you have a breather room, I don't know if you guys have experienced that, you went through a very difficult quarter, and then the minute you finish the quarter, your body kind of just collapsed, and you get sick, and really sick. It's almost your body was well, you paid the dues, now I'm getting interest. You overdrawn your energy. Now it's time for you to repay with interest. So that's kind of basically what Elijah, right? It doesn't make sense. Why just a chapter ago, he was this dramatic, prophet, working against all the prophets. And now he's just weak and tired. And look at what God responded. God didn't respond with this deep theological, spiritual, intellectual conversation. God just sent an angel. Angel touched him and said, get up and eat. Right? He slept, he fell asleep, and then the angel kind of fed him. He looked around, there was some bread And then it's water. He drank, and then he lay down again. And then the angel Lord came back again and said, get up and eat. Like, this is the most tender, like, manifestation of God's love. That our emotions and our stress and our anxiety impacts our body. And sometimes you just need rest. You just need a retreat. You just need time to just nourish your physical body. So mindfulness, I think some of you guys have mentioned, it's about slowing down. It is about creating these sacred pauses. When we are on autopilot, and it's okay because we are very busy people. We can't be slow with everything. I once led a mindfulness group for adolescents, and one of the practice we do is mindful eating, where we eat mindfully. And the kid comes back and said, like, my mom got so mad because I was eating my dinner so long. It takes too long to eat mindfully. So we got in trouble for asking a teenager to eat like their spaghetti for too long. But we can't do it. Like, if my kid eats mindfully for like an hour every meal, like, I would not do well. But it's more like we need pockets. We need to be intentional in creating these pockets where we can slow down, we can create space, and we can create distance. And that comes with intentionality, because our normal rhythm is that we just keep go, and go. I'm not going to go in details where we don't have time for this, but a lot of mindfulness is like really incorporating in our day-to-day lives, right? Is like, can we walk mindfully? Can we eat mindfully? Can we breathe mindfully? And all of this, we try to use our 5 senses, because our 5 senses is really activating our body. That no matter where our mind goes, I've gone to walks where my mind is just thousands of miles away. I'm walking, but I'm not really here. And so when I mindfully walk and really activate my 5 senses, smelling things, looking at the colors, touching things, feeling the texture, that kind of brings me back to the current moment, the present moment, that I'm not just like living in whatever space we are. So far we've talked more about in terms of acute stress. We talked a little bit about burnout in the case study of Elijah, but we've talked mostly about stress, acute stress, and how we manage through mindfulness. I wanted to kind of shift a little bit and talk about chronic stress or anxiety. So I think most of us, especially we now live in this very fast-paced era where, yes, we do have acute stress. Maybe if I give you a journal, you can list like 5 things that are stressful that's coming up. But beyond that, we are dealing with like multiple things. Many of you guys are both a student and a daughter and a son and maybe a partner and an employee, and you take on multiple roles. And everything that's going on adds onto it and turns into kind of like chronic stress. People may have experienced, anyone experienced burnout? This like deep sense of exhaustion, right? Where you feel so tired and fatigued that just sleeping 10 hours doesn't do the job. Like, you're tired, but you're not just sleepy. You have this deep sense of exhaustion. And then burnout also kind of makes you feel like, what is going on? Like, who am I? Your identity may be challenged. You may feel like lots of interest, feel like nothing is meaningful. I'm not sure why I'm working so hard for what. It's not just a physical kind of like manifestation of just tiredness. It impacts the core of our identity. And a related concept of it is you may feel lost. Again, now I'm talking about like things may be quote unquote going well. You can't really pinpoint something, that is causing you stress, but you just feel a bit lost. Am I heading in the right direction? Am I where am I supposed to be? Is this the path that I'm called to do? Is this where I'm supposed to be? Again, you may not necessarily have a major decision that you need to discern, but it's this sense of like, I feel lost or I feel disoriented. Like, maybe you are where you thought you wanted to be 10 years ago, and you're exactly where you are. But then you're like, but I'm not sure what's next. Or is this really what I want to be? Or maybe you find yourself in a place that you didn't expect yourself to be. You had always planned to be like this, and then for a lot of different reasons, you end up here. Again, it's not that things are bad, but you're just like perhaps a little disoriented. Like, where am I heading? What am I? What am I doing? Anyone watched Moving? Anyone heard of that? No, you guys don't watch Korean dramas? So this is like my latest binge. That's my stress relief. It's like I binge on Korean dramas. Not one have watched Moving. So that'd be a little bit of spoiler alert, I guess. But it's not too much. So watch it, it's amazing. So it's about like these individuals, both kids and parents, have this special power. And there is this family where the special power is that they can fly. So the dad, who I think is very handsome, can fly. It's like he just flies to North Korea from South Korea and do these like missions. They have a son, and they didn't want people to know that he has a special power. So he grows up having all these weights around him so that he just walks without having to fly. And he gains a lot of weight until he met this girl, and positive emotions, makes him float. And at least the translation, I don't know about Korean, at least when I watch on Netflix or not Hulu, it says the word float. That because he didn't have the training that his dad have, when certain things happen, he just floats. And he's disoriented because he's just literally floating. And in this scene, he needs the girl to like pull him down and to like put on these weights, and the girl has to like literally like grab him and walk him back home. I find that to be a vivid image of disorientation. I was in a state of disorientation for a while. I think I still am in a state of disorientation, where you feel you're floating. Again, it's not like one thing is going wrong or like something is bad, but you have this sense of like, I feel like, I don't know, I'm floating. I'm not sure am I where I'm supposed to be? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Where am I heading? This sense of like not being grounded. And disorientation, burnout, feeling lost, this chronic stress and fatigue, those are not who God has created us to be. We are created to walk. We are created to at least stand. If not, we're not able to walk, let alone run. So I want to take a moment, last 6 minutes, we talked about mindfulness from a psychological perspective, right? It's training our muscles of our mind to not multitask, to be single-tracked, so that we can pay attention to the present moment. But the idea of mindfulness or meditation has been going on not just the last 10, 20 years, right? It's centuries. It's from a rich, like deep faith and wisdom tradition. And this word was translated from the original word sati, which the literal translation means memory. So from a psychological perspective, mindfulness is being alert and aware. But if we take into account from a faith-based, the original aspect of it, it is about remembering and recalling. It's part of paying attention, because you need to pay attention to things. But it's saying that you're not just paying attention only to yourselves, to your body, to your thoughts, and to your feelings. With Christian mindfulness, it is about recollection and recognition. So what are we paying attention? We are paying attention to what God has done for us in the past, both individually and collectively. That's why worship is important. That's why community is important. Because by being mindful, it means that we're mindful of God's mercy and God's faithfulness to us and to our people and our community in the past. Christian mindfulness is also about recognition. It is recognizing God is in this present moment. God is here with us in this building, in this room. God is with us and with you in whatever pain and suffering and stress that you're feeling in this moment. work has been stressful for a while, and I've been meeting with the spiritual director for more than 10 years now. And for a season, every time when I meet with her, her encouragement to me is that when you step into a meeting that's contentious, know that God is already there. God is there. Your job and your discipline is to recognize his presence in the tension, in the stress, in the chaos of things. You need to intentionally recognize that he is there. It may take the form of like a prayer, even a word called, say, Jesus. That is a prayer. You're saying that, Jesus, like, I need you. Like, help me see you in this moment of disorientation. Help me see you in this moment of tension or stress. So if we think about this from a more like spiritual of faith tradition, mindfulness is more than just paying attention. It is paying attention specifically to the presence of God. It is to recognize that God is here, but just the fact that God is here may not mean that much to us if we are not aware of that. So it's saying that in the present moment, again, whether it is a meeting that we are stuck in, a conflict that we are stressed about, or a longer season where we don't see answers to pain. There are a lot of things in life that we don't have really easy answers. A close family member dealing with a terminal illness, a family who's struggling with finding a place to live. A lot of things in this world that we face, perhaps that you hear or that relate to you, are these chronic, long-standing pain. But how do we cultivate? And it doesn't come naturally. It is a muscle, like any other muscle that we train. We train our muscle to recognize that, God, we are here. And then when we go to the past, it's no longer through the lens of nostalgia, like, oh, I wish things were like that. I wish like life were simpler. I wish the world is whatever. I wished whatever. It's not through that lens, but it's through the lens of this deep gratitude that, God, I recognize how you have led me to this place. I recognize how you have been with me through the deepest valleys. I recognize, I see you. Thank you. And then with that, when we think about the future, I still worry about like our kids. I still worry about the future. But again, it is this practice. It won't just come magically. It's not like an end goal that we'll just wake up one day and say like, oh, we reached it. It is a muscle that we need to keep like training us. It's that, God, we trust you. I don't know exactly how this path is going to go. I don't know if you're calling me to stay in this place or to move. I don't know if you're calling my family to a different mission or purpose. I don't know. But God, because of what you have done in the past, because of how I see you and your work in this present moment, I choose to trust you. And it is intentionality, it's choosing to trust God in those moments. This is one of my favorite theologians, and he wrote this book, Love Meets Wisdom, and he talks about mindfulness should pervade the past, present, and future in such a way that transforms our grateful recollection of the past, as well as our trustful hope in God's fidelity in the future into a life of obedience. I think oftentimes we strive to live a life of faithfulness. And I think faithfulness and obedience are kind of synonyms. Like, what does it mean to be faithful? What does it mean to obey, especially when things are chaotic and stressful? I wanted to end just briefly on how do we cultivate this. It is literally like going to the gym. Like, if you want 6 packs, like you need to go to the gym. Like, there's no shortcut of doing that. And if you stop, your 6-pack will disappear. It's like a one-to-one correlation in some way. What does it mean to cultivate this God awareness? Knowing cognitively the fact that God is present with us in the moment does not translate to us living in a way that recognizes that. It's 2 different things. Knowing about a concept and being able to live in accordance with the reality that has happened, that takes practice. It doesn't translate And it always starts with the body. What does it mean? Like if you or your friend is experiencing a lot of like stress, anxiety, burnout, it's not a moment to kind of talk, intellectually or perhaps even spiritually. A lot of it is like, what does it mean to develop a rhythm of rest? So much of our emotions and our well-being are tied to our physical well-being. Like literally the prescription of sleep, diet, and fresh air. It's not going to solve a lot of things, but it will allow our body to be in a place that we are able to have the energy to see God's presence. Because when you're tired, when you're burnt out, you can't see God's presence. You can't. You just cannot. With thoughts, I was going to do a picture of my kid. Like, he's into, like, drawing things, and then he would show me, like, Mom, look at this. And he would just, like, put it right in front of me. And I'm like, whoa, I can't see it. And he'd be like, look. And he would just push it further and further into, like, literally my eyes. And I'm like, no, I can't see it. And so I think cultivating Christian mindfulness through the thoughts is like we take a step back. We take a step back, and we have this, like, recognition that in all our thoughts and all our deeds, God is with us. And what does that look like? And finally, community. Community is so key because when you're going through stress and anxiety, your brain is in a fog. People who've been burned out perhaps can relate. Like you are floating. Maybe you can kind of like do the autopilot stuff. You can still clean. Maybe you can still do some things. You can still go to work and take care of like household things. But then your brain is sort of like in a fog. You need people who can pull you down. You need good friends who can say like, oh, you're floating. Let me hold your hand. Let me wrap my arm around your shoulder. Let me walk with you together. Let me remind you of God's mercy and God's faithfulness. Because when you're burned out, when you're stressed, when you're tired, you can't think straight. You can't say like, oh, let me pull out this journal and read all the things that God has done for me. We need someone to remind us, someone to tap us on the shoulder and say, hey, I know you're feeling this way right now, but God has been faithful in the past, and God will remain faithful. Maybe you're that voice to someone around you. And if we go back to our story of Elijah, after being taken care of by God, there is that famous passage, right, where God showed up, not in the powerful wind, not in the earthquake, but in a gentle whisper. God's presence in the time of chaos can oftentimes feel like a gentle presence or gentle whisper. But look at the order of things. It's only when Elijah are well-fed, well-rested, feel more oriented physically, then God shows up. If Elijah was like in that broom tree, tired and fatigued and depressed, and God showed up in a gentle whisper, it's not going to work. So our body and how we take care of our body is as important, if not more important, and it's part of the spiritual discipline. I think that's all I have. So with that, I'm going to end. I know I'm past a little 2 o'clock.
If there's any questions.
Okay, I'll take questions if people have.
I can just shout it. Thinking about like the sacred pause, especially when you're on autopilot. Sometimes you're on autopilot, you miss crazy traffic. There's this temptation that like if I take the wheel now and try to take a sacred pause, everything's gonna collide and the world's gonna come crashing down. And, do you have any thoughts or advice for just like how to get over that hump so that you build this trust in the sacred pause?
Yeah.
And you kind of
Yeah.
have luxury for that.
Yeah. Do I need to repeat the question? Everybody heard it? So if you're in the freeway, you don't want to just stop in the middle of the freeway. That's not safe, right? Like sacred pauses needs to correspond to safety. Like you look for, if your engine, whatever light is turning on, right? You then look for the closest exit, right? Like you then slowly exit out the ramp and find a place to park. Or if you really can't, you then sort of move to the side and park, right? Same thing, like sacred pauses, like if you're in literally the middle of something, you can't just drop everything because the cost is too much. So I would say two things. One is you still have to find a safe place to have these sacred pauses. And the other is you want to get to understand the engine of your car or your body well enough that you don't want until the last mileage that the gas tank is empty to find gas. Like, right? You want to like find gas when you know that you still have 10 miles to go, knowing that if in where you end up being stuck, you need a little bit of. And so it's a feedback loop. It's learning about your body. It's learning about what triggers you in ways that you may not realize. And you say, oh, I realize that this is causing more stress than I realized. So next time I'm going to do that. Or like next time someone who knows me well can remind me. Like Akio sometimes will say like, okay, your schedule is too crazy, you can't do it. And I'll be like, no, I can't. He's like, no, you can't. So you learn to trust, right? You have like these bumper things to protect you. It doesn't mean that you don't make mistakes. It's a journey. Like you're not gonna wake up one day. I'm still struggling. But it's more about learning yourself and who God has created you to be. That's a long answer to your question. Yes.
When we talk about mindfulness, like it is so tied to like Oriental traditions and Buddhism and stuff like that. And then even now, like Western culture, like even in my company, like if you download an app where it's a meditation app, and where you do like you kind of watch your breathing or stuff like that. I mean, is this consistent with Christian theology? I mean, do you recommend doing that as a psychologist? Versus like as someone who is like a Christian, are we allowed to do that?
Yeah. Are there any conflict between kind of like the fact that mindfulness is from more Buddhist tradition and it conflicts with our Christian identity? I would say that there are two things. One is the behavior or the practice, and one is intent. So if you were to ask a Buddhist monk, a Catholic priest, and an atheist to practice meditation, outwardly, the three looks the same. They are meditating. But I would say inwardly, it looks very different because their intention is different. What goes inside and the purpose and meaning of it are very different. So the short answer to that is I don't think there's a conflict because there's a rich tradition of like meditation, like Lectio Divina, Jesus' prayer, a lot of it coincide with mindfulness. But I do think that it is on the person who practices, not the practice itself.
Any thoughts? Because what you were saying earlier about when you turn on social media or look at the news, it's immediate, like the sense of even the headlines cause stress and anxiety and it can be overwhelming. But yet I feel like I need to be mindful about what's going on in the world. So how do you approach all that?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Everything is in moderation. And everything is recognizing yourself. So it's not saying that, yes, we need to like consume all the news or we need to shut down all the news. It's more like figuring out, okay, so for me, I recognize that it does trigger something, so I won't do it right before a meeting. Like I won't do it right before sleep. Like I would figure out what is a safe time to do. And I know that, okay, I can tolerate, scrolling the headlines and I won't click into the details. Some of it is like learning to protect yourself. It doesn't mean that you are avoiding. You are saying that you are intentionally, avoiding certain things because you are allergic to certain things in this season. And so then you can better protect your well-being.
Yeah, so I really liked what you were saying before about, like, it feels like you have a whole bunch of stressors coming in, and what I think I got from it was that, like, it's really important to, like, name them, I guess, and notice them. But then you also said it's really important to, like, rely on your community and your friends to, like, get you through the problems. And the first one to me seems to be something that's, like, very internal, and the other one is very external. And both of them seem important, but there's obviously a line where, like, you're relying on your friends too much for them to, like, pull you down, I guess, when sometimes you need to. And I'm wondering if you have an idea of what that line would be.
I think that line depends on so many things. There are seasons where I need someone to pull me down more because of various things that are going on. But knowing that that's part of community, right? We carry each other's burdens. So there isn't an equation, right? It has to be 50-50. Like, am I doing my job enough that gives me the ticket to be worth someone else's helping me out? And some of times, like, when we're inside thinking about this, I don't know if you guys have tried, like, and we untangle the yarn, you try to untangle, but it got more tangled. And it's making things worse. Thus you realize, okay, I can't do it myself. Because sitting in front of a journal trying to, like, map out all the emotions may not lead to more clarity. It may lead to more confusion and more frustration. And that's when you realize, I need a therapist, I need a friend, I need a sounding board. But then the sounding board helps you untangle a bit, and then you realize, oh, okay, I think there's more that I need to unpack, and then you go back and you do the work. So it's kind of like a back and forth ongoing process. But I think community, that's what community is, right? That's what family is we hold each other up. We pull each other down and remind us of the grounding importance. I don't know if I answered your question. Yeah. One last question if people have. If not, Pastor Sue. And
Joey, thank you so much, Joey,
Yeah.
for speaking with us. Former small group leader, too, so thank you so much. Pastor Fung's going to talk about our church initiative about mental health. But before we do this, I have a comment on Steve's thought about it comes from Buddhism. I think that's not true. You read the early church history, there were a lot of monks who did meditation and practice of mindfulness, actually. There was a monk by the name of Anthony who literally changed himself against the rock just to prevent him from going all over the map physically and just meditate. And so if you go to, like, places like in Turkey and other places, there's a lot of monasteries where that's what monks do. And it's a Christian practice. And just the Buddhist practice, because my great-grandfather was a Buddhist monk, is more like me and how you control. Christian practice of meditation is allowing God to show up and letting your mind dwell on what God is speaking to you, especially in Scripture. And so we do need some times of quietness. Like the Quakers are known for silence, and that's why sometimes in worship we're very quiet, because we want to have some time to hear the Lord. Okay, that's just a comment. But thank you, Dr. Joey. And so I'm going to have Pastor Van talk about some of our mental health initiative. Go ahead.
Right. I wanted to just share, actually on behalf of Julia Cho, she actually approached me like a few months ago saying that she really wanted to help our church grow in mental health awareness and the issues that are around it. So I just wanted to put it out there if anyone wants to kind of join a small group. We now have a few of us who are kind of working together in the initial, like, she already put together kind of some thoughts together of what would help our church grow and some of the areas of learning, how to take care of our mental health. So talk to me, talk to Julia, and in the next, days, months ahead, we'll be kind of rolling some things out with the church. So thanks, that's it.
And one of the prayers that I have is that we can have a counseling center here on the second floor. So pray that things will happen and the Bank of Heaven will provide everything, and I do believe so. He has been so far, and what we need to do is keep the vision. Our goal as a church is that you be whole, not just spiritually, mentally, emotionally, also in your career, that you be whole. So that's our goal. So again, thank you, Dr. Joey, and thank you, Akil, for coming out with your 2 kids. Appreciate it, Akil. Akil was also our former elder and a small group leader too, so we welcome you back. Let's pray as we end. Lord, thank you for this time, and thank you for just awareness of the stresses we face, and that there needs to be time to be mindful of all this, and to know that your Holy Spirit relaxes us, your Holy Spirit gives us the peace that we need, and that you will guide us. So thank you, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, thank you again. And if you want to ask more questions to Joey, feel free. Just approach. And the van should be leaving about 5-10 minutes. Yeah, okay.